Welcome, everybody, to the Fantasy Golf Insider Webcast and Podcast. I'm Jeff Bergerson, joined, as always, by my partner, Zachary Turcotte, the mysterious one. We are with FantasyGolfInsider.com, your home for everything fantasy golf. Come check us out today, become a premium member if you are not already, and gain access to all of our valuable tools and articles every single week of the year for fantasy golf. This broadcast is available in a podcast form on iTunes and Stitcher. If you do us a favor and give us a good review on there, it will help us a lot. Also, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you get an alert that says our video is out every week. Zachary, an exciting week this week. The Farmers Insurance Open, really the first
real event.
Yeah, full field, no cut event with a good field. You know,
right. And Tiger.
There is a guy named Tiger Woods going to be around this weekend. He might draw some interest.
A little bit.
DraftKings has finally come around to
getting the prices out early.
And making the contests exciting. They're large this week.
I think if they did this every week, like if they put the prices out by Friday night or Saturday each week, DraftKings, we don't care if the odds are perfectly in alignment. The players are going to make adjustments. They're going to pick around whatever you come up with in price anyways. So there's no need to wait till 4 o'clock on Monday afternoon to get these out. Plus, it makes my Mondays so much easier because
so nice.
We're able to start delivering content on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, rather than scrambling on Monday night, scrambling on Tuesday night, get everything hopefully out and done by Wednesday morning so that people have got something to go off of to make their picks. So it's been huge this week.
Everything you just said was a complete waste of time. Because they will not put them out early again until the Masters.
But we've got everything up already.
It's great.
I even put out my GPP picks today,
Amazing.
Which is incredible. I've actually already had a couple days to look at the prices. So as a daily spin early preview, I did get the picks out this week that I will be using for my $103 GPP rosters that I put together for the week. So go on and check that out and get your research started a little bit early this week.
There's $100,000 up for grabs for first place in that $3 birdie this week, which excites me. A lot of people, or not, I wouldn't say a lot, but some people like the flatter payout structure. For me personally, I love that big payday. It gets me excited.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not playing those contests. Like this week was a good week. I had a 2x week on my $300 100 lineup entries in that field, and if it wouldn't have been for Ryan Palmer being on 60% of my rosters, I would have gone crazy. I probably would have had a 5, 6, 7x week, if not having a good shot to win the whole thing. But I'm not playing those to make 1.5x or 2x, or a little here, a little there.
No.
I want the big payday. That's what you need. If you're a GPP player, you have to hit one of those during the season, or at least if it's a large enough one, every couple of seasons, you've got to hit something big to make it worthwhile. Because over time, if you're just making a little bit more than you put in, a lot of weeks when you get wiped out or your core completely misses, you get crushed. It's not going to make you money slowly over time. The cash games are there to make you a little bit of money over time if you can utilize the philosophy of building good cash game teams, not making the same types of mistakes as your opponents out there. But the GPPs are really let's hit one of these every few months or so in terms of a decent payout. And that's how it's got to be, and that's why I'm happy that there are some bigger paying spots in those contests this week.
I like it. You need to be the Hudson Swafford of DFS golf, where you just grind away, just push, and then boom, you win. Speaking of Hudson Swafford, let's talk about the career builder.
Yeah, it was a good week. We've been on him for a long time, going back into last season. I mean, we first started writing the guy up. I still remember 2 years ago writing him up for the first time, thinking, oh, this guy's really got great ball striking skills. His long iron game is excellent, putts it pretty well. And we just couldn't figure out that first year, like, where is this guy failing? Of course, his wedge game, his short game is kind of awful, and he does make some mistakes where he'll just fall apart on 2 or 3 holes on Saturday afternoon and fall completely out of contention. But he held it together all 4 rounds this week, which was fantastic.
I believe you had a saying for him, though, didn't you?
Yeah, death taxes and Hudson Swafford, yeah.
Letting you down.
Letting me down, yeah. And that's kind of the way it was when I first started writing him up, because that first year he'd have these flashes for 2 or 3 weeks where he looked so good, And then he did that at the beginning of last year. And then somewhere along the lines and around the summertime, something clicked for him last year. And now he's made 19 straight cuts, capped off with a victory. And he's remained affordable throughout the entire time. So he's been a guy we just have gone back to again and again and again.
I actually wrote him up in the Crystal Ball article, and I actually said that he was going to get a win this year. Did you know that?
I did know
That's
that.
Pretty.
It's a good start for the Crystal Ball.
Yeah.
When you're grading yourself at the end of the year, you can just put an A for that first prediction.
Well, and Adam Hadwin was also right next to him in the article, and I'm like, holy cow, this could be nice.
And that was awesome. And I'm still just absolutely kicking myself as, over the weekend. I was putting together my $1,000 clubhouse entry over the weekend. And I had a couple different versions that I was looking at, and then I eventually swung to the second one. The first team...
Well, you texted it to me on Tuesday.
I was like, well, what do you think of this team right here that I've got in place? And you're like, that looks fine. You're like, people generally under own read. I was like, oh, all right.
And then I had Hadwin.
I had Hadwin.
And Hudson.
I had Swafford. And it had Patrick Reed, it had Webb Simpson, Ryan Palmer... and then it was Swafford, Hadwin, and Castro. That was my first lineup that I had wanted to use, and then I decided
you tinkered Wednesday night.
And then I decided late on Wednesday, I'm like, I don't like that one so much, and I ended up getting away from both Swafford and Hadwin. Most of the other guys, it stayed intact.
That would have run away with the clubhouse for $10,000. You didn't want that, right?
I would have won the contest. That would have been all mine. By a lot. It wouldn't even have been close.
Yeah. Don't tinker.
One other guy had, the winner had Swafford on it, and he was the only Swafford owner. When I saw that, I thought, only one Swafford owner here. So, just generally as a practice, I guess maybe the lesson is not to tinker so much. Trust your instincts.
Yeah. Build your teams and let them go.
And I'm sure there's plenty of stories out there of folks who have tinkered and have gotten away with it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
You just end up kicking yourself later if you end up going back and second guessing. So, the moral of the story, just stick with your initial feelings on stuff.
Yep. And we should mention that you are going to be out at the Farmers Insurance Open at Torrey Pines this week.
I am. I get into town on Wednesday. The weather actually hasn't been terrible here, so I don't feel like I'm getting as good of a deal. I like to leave when it's near blizzard conditions and people here are really sad and depressed. And then when I post that Facebook picture of me kicking around the sand on the beach, they're that much more jealous. But it's still going to be 70 degrees and sunny, so I'll make the best of it while I'm out there. I'll probably be out there for at least parts of 3 days, maybe 4. It just depends on how the tournament's going. I plan on definitely being there for the Cut Sweat Friday afternoon, so I'll be giving some live reporting action, so you guys kind of let me know who you want me to follow and who you guys want me to troll out there on the course. I'll do my best to get out there. Maybe you need somebody you need the reverse hex magic on somebody. I can probably spread that by cheering them on, and then they'll collapse. So
if you're picking Brooks, just don't follow him.
Funny you should say.
Why?
Funny you should say that. He is one of the guys that I will be picking this week. But I'll be following him. Saturday we should have a pretty good crowd. There's going to be a few other folks that I'll be out there with. You'll see all of us wearing our green Fantasy Golf Insider T-shirts. So stop by, have a cocktail with us, have a beer. Watch a little bit of golf, talk a little bit of fantasy action. So should be great. I'm looking forward to it.
Let's talk Farmers Insurance Open and the particulars. Again, we have this rotation of courses. Only this week it's just 2 courses, not 3 courses. It's not a stupid pro-am. It's Torrey Pines South, which is the more famous of the 2. It's the longer of the 2. It's 7,698 yards. It's a par 72. Players will play that one on Thursday or Friday, and then they will also play the North on the other day, and that's much less in size, 7,200 yards, also a par 72, and it's a lot easier.
They've tried to make it tougher, I guess, over the last few years, so they're supposed to be a little bit closer.
And then they go back to the South course on Saturday and Sunday.
Yep.
So, as I mentioned earlier, it's a loaded field. Tiger Woods coming back. Are you excited for that?
I'm not a Tiger fan, I guess, per se.
I'm not either.
But I like having him out there. I like watching him play while he's out there because it just attracts so much excitement.
Oh, definitely.
And obviously, even though I'm not directly cheering for him for the most part. It's great for us if he does well. We want more eyes on the game.
It's good for the industry. You get a bunch of new people in, and it's better for all of us.
Everybody wants to be in, so I am happy that he's back. And he looked reasonably healthy. I just don't think he's been healthy the last couple of years. Taking all of last year off looks like it got him back in health. He's going to take some time to knock off the rust. You saw flashes of the old Tiger at the Hero. I mean, he was one of the top players in terms of birdies, but I think he was probably the top player in terms of bogeys.
Absolutely.
As well. So he's there. The game, I think, is there, and his health looks like it's there. It's just going to take a few tournaments for him to start feeling comfortable being out on the course in a competitive environment again. But that said, if there is a course where you may just want to have that 5% Tiger exposure.
He's had a little success here.
Yeah, quite a bit of success here over the years. I think for that reason, and then just seeing the fact that he did nail so many birdies in his first appearance, I will probably take a tiny share of Tiger. So I think that's the way to go.
He finished 15th at the Hero out of 18, not good. However, he was much better in DK points scored. You know, he was right up there amongst the leaders in DK points because of all the birdies. So, you know, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I would have liked to have seen his price down in the 6K range and just really make it tantalizing for people. Wouldn't that have been? You know, the 7,900 and, you know,
there's plenty of players that are so much better at a lower price, playing better, good tournament history here, that it does get tough to load up on him at that price. But it is worth owning, because if he does manage to get through the cut, he's going to probably post a lot of birdies over the weekend. So from that perspective, just at a points perspective, he should be okay. Now, whether or not he does make it all the way through the cut.
And be consistent and avoid the blow-up holes that will keep him in contention.
I don't know, but I think the way to go is either a total fade or a small amount of ownership on him.
Not a total own.
I can't see anybody making him like a core player this week. I mean, there probably will be a couple folks that will give it a shot. I just think that the risk is probably bigger than the upside. I really don't think he's going to come back and just top 10 this thing.
Probably not.
So,
key stats this week: strokes gained tee to green, strokes gained putting. We're going to mix in driving distance because the South Course is so long. It is going to favor the Bombers a little bit. Par 4 and par 5 scoring and birdies or better. If you want to look at, par 5 birdies or better too, that will be helpful as well.
And it's a real mix of players, though, that do succeed here. It isn't.
Absolutely. It's not just the Bombers.
A lot of the stats that you just read off would make people think that, wow, it's just the bigger hitters. But a lot of the guys who've ended up winning this thing over the years have been more on the total driving. They've had the accuracy mixed with the distance and some chipping and putting to get them there. So don't necessarily isolate the drivers as the guys that you have to go to this week.
No, it's generally a high-end player type of guy that wins. You don't get a lot of scrubs. I guess Scott Stallings was the outlier there. But most of the time, if you look at the names who have won here, Snedeker, obviously an elite player.
Jason Day.
Right. Day, and there have been some other
Tiger.
Right. So I'm thinking one of the top 10, 15 price guys is probably going to end up winning it because it is such a challenging course. So you want to start at the top?
I do.
All right.
Right
what do you
up
have
at
to
the
say
top
about that?
Well, you got a couple guys, the 3 guys really up there that stand out that you're going to have to make some decisions on. But Jason Day, Dustin Johnson, and Hideki all up at the top there. Although I look at DJ's course history here, it's a little shaky.
It is a little shaky.
His game he really elevated his game overall last season.
That's true.
And then if you look at the year before, things were kind of coming undone. That was sort of when he needed to take a little break for about 6 months or so.
Yep.
I can kind of disregard that year when he missed the cut. And he didn't miss the cut by much that year. If I remember right, it was maybe like a stroke or something along those lines. So I think I could kind of disregard that. I will own some DJ. I probably will own a little bit more of Jason Day.
Okay.
He looked pretty good. The biggest thing I wanted to see with Day was when he came back at Kapalua. How did he look? And he was pretty steady for all 4 days.
Yeah.
There weren't any real amazing rounds, but there also weren't any real terrible rounds either. So I think he was using that to get warmed up again, kind of feel good about his game. And this has been a course where he's been very good.
Yes.
Before last year, if you look at last year, he ended up missing the cut. But if you also remember, there was with
sick.
Jason Day, it's always a little bit of a circus.
Yeah.
Anytime, because he'll let you know if he's feeling any sort of injury, any sort of illness, just anything at all that could affect his play. And of course, he revealed beforehand that he was feeling sick.
Right.
And then he went out and played. He started off okay, and then he completely tailed off. He ended up missing the cut, but that's not a factor this year. And
not yet.
Yeah, not yet. Yeah, we haven't heard about it yet this week. But I just really like the way his game lines up here overall. You know, he is a bomber. He can hit the ball a long ways. He's got a great approach game. Obviously, lights out in terms of his putting, and he's been a former winner here a couple years ago. So I like Day. I probably will end up loading up quite a bit on him. And DJ, the other thing that will hold me back a little bit is he just played last week in Abu Dhabi, which...
Does that concern you? So him, Ricky Fowler, Ben An, I think are the three guys who are coming over from the European event in Abu Dhabi.
12-hour time change, and they played, you know, they were all playing out there on Sunday.
Does that matter?
Yeah, I think a little bit.
Does it?
A little bit. I mean, it's, you know, I think when people worry too much when it goes East Coast to West Coast, like 2-3 hours, you know, they get crazy. And this is 12 hours away. This is on the other side of the world. I think it's probably about a 8, 9, 10 hour time difference, whatever it is. So there will be a little bit of adjustment in terms of coming back, getting their bodies realigned, and then going out to be competitive there on Thursday. So it may take a day or two to get going. Usually if they get through the first round, okay, it's fine. It's not a real big issue, but I do see it as being a little bit more of an issue when they come from so far away within that same week. So it does concern me a little bit. So that's why I will probably temper my ownings of DJ a little bit. But having gone big with Jason Day at the top and a little bit on DJ, it didn't really give me any room for Hideki, who's probably been like the hottest guy out there. I think that's going to be the case with
a lot of folks.
So are you then going to play that role of jumping in on Hideki?
I like Hideki, yeah. I mean, he obviously disappointed his last time out, so people are going to be disappointed by that. I think he's going to be overshadowed by Day and DJ. But look, he had one... It wasn't an awful performance. It just wasn't up to...
It wasn't a Matsuyama performance.
Right, a first or a second. You know. So I think for ownership purposes, I will definitely own some Matsuyama. I think his ownership will probably come in at around, 15%?
Yeah, something like that. That'd be fair. It should be spread out a little bit more. With Hideki, they're going to see his tournament history here and think,
not good.
This isn't that spectacular. But they probably were doing that in Hawaii a couple weeks ago. And
True.
When he made his first cut, he ended up 27th. But this should be a course where he plays pretty well. He hits the ball pretty long. He's fairly accurate. He's got a good approach game. I mean, there really isn't a course we're going to look at that we're going to say, Hideki's game just doesn't mix here much at all. Maybe some of the shorter courses just because he won't have the same type of advantage, I guess. But this really should be a course where his game should stand out. And it just hasn't yet. So you do get that extra bonus of the fact that he has missed a couple of cuts here in recent years. So that should keep him capped probably in that 15 to 20 range. So a great opportunity here. If you want to make Hideki a part of your core, go ahead and own him at 40-50%. You're going to have a huge edge over the rest of the field if he does come through with a big performance this week. So a really good game theory type of strategy if you balance off those couple players at the top.
I think we get high ownership from those top three guys because the pricing is so soft this week on DraftKings. It allows you to build really great teams, even with stacking one or two of those studs on a team. I did a lot of teams stacking two of them and still coming up with really solid teams.
There's ways to be real contrarian this week. I mean, if you go to the next couple guys on that list, nobody ever owns Justin Rose.
No.
And again, you look at the history here, it's a little bit checkered, but that's usually about the time when he surprises all of us and shows up. I think people will be concerned with Phil's recent history here as well. He's missed, I think, the last 3 cuts, even though he's California guy. So he's certainly played here a lot over the years. I remember last year he was doing just fine until near the end of the second round, and it just fell apart on a couple holes and badly ended up missing right at the end. But there's another guy I don't think that's going to be that heavily owned this week as well. So if you looked at Rose and Mickelson, which I kind of passed them up for a few other guys to have a little bit more balance, but those are going to be guys that also go under owned.
And nobody's going to own Louis.
Nobody ever owns
No
somebody.
one. And this week he's in between John Rahm, Jimmy Walker, and Brad Snedeker.
And for that very exact reason, I do own Louis. I don't own huge shares of him because
you can't because he's so unreliable.
Really unpredictable, but I love having him in tougher fields like this. This is when he tends to elevate his game. If he shows up at like the Travelers, he usually just doesn't give a shit.
Right.
And you can see it.
Yep.
And he's usually dancing on the cut line, if not missing the cut on Friday afternoon. But when he is out there playing against the world's best, that's when he tends to shine the most. And so just for that reason, I think I bought about a 10 to 15% share of him this week. And if he goes off and takes 8th place, nobody else in the field probably has. He's probably one of those guys who's owned by 6%, 7% at the most. So I think that's a pretty solid contrarian play.
Dropping down into the low 9s and 8K range, just a loaded range here. I mentioned Snedeker and Walker, who will be highly owned, and why not with their tournament history? Very, very good. That's obvious. John Rahm at 9,200, always popular.
I think I'm going to stay away from him this week.
Are you? Why?
I think so, just because we're seeing such heavy ownership week after week after week, regardless of what his actual finish is. I mean, he's had a couple nice top 10 finishes, but pretty much he's basically just been a cut maker for the last few times out. And if he's just going to be a cut maker when he's owned by 30 or 35% of the field, why not invest some of that cash elsewhere in other areas, other guys who are in and around him, instead of having to be all in on him? I mean, next week he's going to be playing in Arizona, so I'll probably
you don't want to fade him.
I'll probably load back up and go in on him again because he's an Arizona State guy. But this week, at a course where he hasn't played before, that is tough, that is challenging, and seeing how he's played over his last few events, which has just been good but not great. I mean, he's a guy who has a ton of blow-up potential within him.
For sure.
He's probably going to end up being like the Brooks Koepka of a couple years ago, where he goes on these huge scoring binges and then he has a double bogey and a triple bogey later on. And he's going to be competitive, I think, but I feel like I want to wait a little bit for those ownership numbers to come back down. I don't really want to own a guy like that with 30% of the field at this point. At least get him down to like 15 to 20 range before I want to have a lot of shares for GPPs.
Fair enough. I like Gary Woodland at 8,600. I like Daniel Berger a little bit at 8,800. And JB Holmes at 8,200 I like as well.
I think all three of those guys will probably be pretty popular.
I'm sure.
This week. Woodland has really found his game. Towards the end of last season, he looked really good. Starting out so far this season, he looked great in his first showing the other week. He's obviously a long ball hitter, great tee to green game. Putter can be a little bit suspect, but improving. So I think that's a great pick, and his price really is at 8,600. That's a great price for what you get as far as upside potential there. So I like that a lot. I think people are going to see JB Holmes, his recent history the last few years, how dominant that he has been on this course. He's another bomber, obviously. Putter gets to be a little bit streaky at times, but another guy who I think has upside potential, especially for 8,200. So I think that's a pretty good price down there as well. I'm probably, before we get too far out of the range, I'll probably pay a little bit to get some Brooks Koepka shares. You know, he was wild in his rookie year, settled down a little bit more last year, had some injuries here and there that he seemed to fight through pretty well. But overall, another long ball hitter who can putt, which I like, so he should be able to take advantage of some of those scoring opportunities that he gets out here. And he doesn't have a ton of course history on the course. Now he's Koepka, so he does tend to be a little bit more popular, but I'm hoping that the $9,900 price tag, as well as the other elite players in the field and the limited course history, keep him somewhere in that 15% range overall. So I think I'll be pretty comfortable there. But yeah, just a lot of guys in that range overall that you can end up building around. And then I did just put a little bit on Byung-Hoon An.
Did you?
He's coming over. Again, he's another guy who's coming over this week from Abu Dhabi. So he did play last week.
Well, he was tied for second. I was watching it at like 3 a.m.
And texting with you.
He was tied for second, and then he got to the par 3 and plunked a couple in the water and just dropped out of it. So he was right there in contention in a loaded field in Abu Dhabi.
This should be a course that he does well. He's a big guy.
And no one will own him.
Nobody will own him at 8,400. That's probably high enough of a price so that people just say, I'll just pay for Woodland right up here. I'll drop down and grab Steele at 8,000.
Yep.
And Steele, there's another guy who I would probably own a decent chunk of this week as well. It killed me because he was one of my guys that I had in my 6-pack as far as being able to win last week on the Feinberg show. And he was right there all day. He had just one putt after another. He's within a stroke or two of the lead and just could not hit a birdie putt.
He missed a couple 3-footers, which were driving me insane.
And it was such a winnable event for him as well. I mean, nobody was taking over. Nope. Nobody was making that real big charge to get to minus 22 and just put the thing away. So he was right there all day, but just could not make a putt. But he's looked great so far overall to start the season. And this should be a course, I think he excels on it for 8,000. He's below the average price. So there's another guy that I like in that 8K range.
Let's drop down to the 6 and 7K range. Who are a couple of guys that you're targeting?
Well, just due to
this range?
With the way that the prices came out early, and we were actually commenting before we came on camera, how do they manage to fuck up Charles Howell III's price as much as they did? I mean, even not knowing that the tournament wasn't finished yet, obviously, but
made no difference.
His course history here is so good. They easily could have guessed that he'd have been about the number 15 to 20 guy in terms of the Vegas odds to win the whole thing.
Yep.
And that's not a $7,300 player.
No.
So in the 100 rosters that I build for the $3 event, I will probably own a lot of them just because all he's really got to do is make the cut, which he's done every year of his career, and he's got a ton of top 10 finishes to go along with that. So I can't see a real convincing reason to be fading him at 7,300.
That's the tough part. Even though ownership is going to be really high, generally I like to fade those guys. But if his price was, let's say 9,000 and you felt a guy was going to be that highly owned, it'd be a heck of a lot easier.
I think there's something to be said for getting too cute because you see these guys, you see the tournament success, you know what the ownership's going to be. And now we've taught people enough so that the instinct is kind of, well, maybe I don't want to play that guy. But you don't have to get crazy contrarian with your rosters. Right. All you gotta do is be contrarian with maybe one or two guys who people are overlooking. The other 4 guys can be pretty chalky, so long as they end up showing up reasonably well. But we don't have any reason to think that Charles Howell III would fall off a cliff this week and not play well. He's going to get the opportunities. That he likes to play here. So at 7,300, it's just too good of a price. Like you said, if it was 9,000, and you could think about it a little bit more because he would still have quite a bit of the ownership. The tournament history and his recent form kind of almost bakes in ownership. The price really settles it for me though at 7,300, as well as the next guy down 6,500. I actually had to look back a couple times after I saw the prices released to see Martin Laird.
Yeah, it was bizarre as well.
I didn't get it all. There's another guy who they easily could have put at 7,500 just as a guess. If you had to guess at a week to week what Marty Laird's price was going to be, you could start at 7,500 and you wouldn't really be off by more than 500, probably in either direction. 6,500, that's just a slap in the face insult to Marty Laird. So just
good current form, good tournament history.
2 top 10s in the last couple of years. He's almost a must start for cash games, I would say.
Absolutely. Him and Howell both on a cash game,
both of them
lock him in.
For sure. And I mean, even a guy that we were just talking about, Hudson Swafford, 7,500. If you start your cash game with those 3 guys, which I will, you get everybody else at the top. You can have Jason Day this week in your cash games and not lose any sleep at all about making any sacrifices for the rest of your roster. So don't overthink it in cash at all. And even at GPPs, if you started with those 3 guys as a core and then just rotated the top guys around those 3, you'd probably end up being pretty good because one of those top guys will probably hit those guys, probably make the cut with a little bit of upside. Maybe 1 or 2 of them end up in the top 10. It's a very, very reasonable strategy here this week. A lot of it just goes with the fact that DraftKings wants these contests to fill up. They want bigger contests.
They want
people to get
easier
excited.
For people to build really
they want somebody
good-looking
to
lineups.
Look at a tournament history sheet and say, wow, this guy did really good. Boom. All right, now he's on my roster, and now I can put 2 or 3 other stars on there as well. Those are probably my 3 plays in that range that we like, that I know everybody's going to like. Is there anybody in that range at all who may be a little bit more obscure that you're seeing?
In the 6K range, I'll give you a couple of guys. I like Grayson Murray at 6,200 for GPP. He's not a cash game guy. I think I'm just going to lock and load those guys who you talked about in my cash games. But for GPP purposes, I like Grayson. I like Aaron Wise a little bit this week. young guys, very unpredictable, ton of upside. So it's that, kind of low floor, high ceiling that we talk about wanting for GPP play.
Right.
And I probably won't have a whole lot in guys, close to 6,000,
I'll probably have. There's a few guys in there. Adam Hadwin was 62.
Well, yeah,
6,200. There's
right.
another guy who just
lock him in cash games.
He stood out. I'll have him from some GPP. Maybe a little bit tougher. This is a longer course. He's not a big.
That's the thing that
not a big ball
scares
hitter.
me a little bit. Although he played it pretty well last year, so.
Yeah, so he's been pretty good. He's made a couple of cuts there.
Yeah.
Michael Kim is another guy who I think is probably somebody that you can look at pivoting to in that lower range. That he quietly has had some very nice top 25 finishes here so far to start the season, and he looked good this past weekend. I still don't see anybody talking about him. Plus, he's a Southern California guy. I think he finished around 30th or so here last year. I think that's a pretty solid pivot. And then, another guy down at 6,200 who looked great until the last couple holes this last week, Robert Garrigus. He's been really good here over the last few years just in terms of cut-making ability at 6,200. Definitely a guy with a lot of upside. He's another guy who can bomb it off the tee. If you look at his iron stats, they're incredible. From about 150 yards and beyond, there really aren't any players that are better than him. Especially last year, it was unbelievable because I'm looking at Robert Garrigus. He hardly ever has any real great finishes, and then he had a nice little cut streak going. So obviously at that point, we started to research him a little more. It's amazing when you look at his iron numbers. Of course, that's offset by his ridiculous putter. I mean,
Webb Simpson-like putter.
Wow, he makes Webb look pretty good some days. I mean, yesterday he had a chance there was a moment where Garrigus could have been tied for the lead. He had an eagle putt from about 7 or 8 feet on 11, and he blew it. And it rolled by up to about 5 feet. I thought, oh, man, he left it too far. And then he missed the birdie putt, too. I thought, yeah.
That's why.
There's Robert Garrigus, that's the Garrigus that I know and remember. But
and don't love.
But at 6,200, that's a great price. I'm definitely be mixing him into about 10% of my GPP teams for the week.
Okay.
How about one other guy here that was popular last week?
Who's that?
I don't think I have the heart to do it. I don't think I have the stomach, but Andrew Loop.
No.
Do you have after seeing last week's display?
No.
I mean, he's another guy. He's wild. That's the biggest problem. The biggest knock on his game is that he probably hits more trees than fairways off the tee. But when his game is sharp, he is a long ball hitter.
Yeah.
He's a lights out putter. He is pretty elite in terms of his overall skills putting. He did okay. I think he made the cut here last year. I can't remember offhand, but I think he did make the cut here last year. He burned enough people last week.
What do you think? No, he was only owned by about 5%.
That's all. Yeah. So there was a little bit of buzz, and there were a few people who jumped in on him and got on him. Those people are gone.
Thankfully, it was not us.
Sure. It was not us.
Because he was embarrassing.
Yeah, I didn't own him any place. But yeah, I mean, he was terrible. He was awful. I don't own him, and I'm not going to own him in GPPs.
I won't either.
He will probably be down to less than 1%
probably
of ownership.
Yep.
And if he does happen to have an Andrew Loop type of week, one of his good ones, the 2 or 3 that he'll have all year, he could give you a little bit of boost, a little bit of upside. He will go totally unowned. So, just one more little tip there for you.
The rest will be in our articles. Perry's is already on the site. The tournament preview, Zach's daily spin, will be coming out in the next couple of days, probably.
Maybe tomorrow. I've already got the GPP picks
Tuesday.
Are already up and posted, so that's usually the part that takes me the longest. Now I just have to write the course and strategy preview, which isn't terribly long. You already have your hardcore.
I already put it up there, so I talk a little bit about the strategy that I'm going to utilize this week. So be sure to check that out as well. Do you want to talk for a couple of minutes about the European Tour event? Not really. The contests, yet again, are not very intriguing. Of course, you knew that when they didn't make the contest very big last week in the absolutely stacked field event. So we have the Qatar Masters in Qatar, obviously. It's a pretty good field. It's interesting. I mean, you got Alex Noren at the top, Bernd Wiesberger, Martin Keimer, Cabrera Bello, Tommy Fleetwood, who won last week. All these guys are just playing again after Abu Dhabi.
It's got probably about, because proximity-wise, Abu Dhabi and Qatar, for those that are unfamiliar with Persian Gulf geography, are very, very close together, having flown out of Qatar many times myself. It just amazes me when I turn on the TV and I see just expansive green grass and trees everywhere, and they tell me that it's in Abu Dhabi or Qatar. If you were in Abu Dhabi or Qatar, I mean, from wherever you are flying from, these courses stand out like a sore thumb, because the rest of the countries they're just sand, just sand everywhere. And then all of a sudden, you realize how much money that some of these sheiks and some of these leaders over there have when they just pop out this immaculate green course.
Pretty impressive.
It's unbelievable. I mean, it looks like it's nowhere near the Middle East in terms of the desert. So very close as far as proximity is concerned. But yeah, most of the top players from last week are here, except for the handful who kind of departed. So it's still a very solid tournament overall. The contests are still really small, but I will say so far this season we've been lights out. Like if you've looked at the European content,
been crazy.
The optimal lineups. We haven't really posted much as far as like optimals, but I mean, if you looked at our top guys in terms of top players for salary wise, and then top players in terms of value, the lineups that have popped out, if you just put those guys together, it's been enough to win cash games and GPPs the last couple of weeks, because it's hit everywhere inside the top 10 for the first few weeks. So I've been really excited about that, even though I usually just throw a bunch of them into cash games and thought, double my money, but it would have probably won a few of the bigger contests had we been on there. So make sure you do check that out.
Subscribe to our European Tour package if that interests you, if you're up in the middle of the night and are watching some golf overseas. Is
there anybody here that stands out? I know you like Fleetwood a lot. Is he going to be too obvious after winning?
Yeah, probably. He'll be probably one of the highest owned. There's a couple of guys in the middle there that I've been on, like Jordan L. Smith. I've talked about him before. He keeps playing well. It's 7,500.
You just love that initial.
I love the Jordan L. Smith. Mikko Ilonen at 7,200 stands out to me. Those are a couple of guys, Thomas Dietrich at 7,100 that I like for kind of GPP sleeper type low ownership.
Interesting that David Lingberth this week decided to hop on a plane and go over to Abu Dhabi. So I think he might be the one guy who's going in the other direction. I don't really know what to make of the guy. He was a guy that I owned quite a bit of last week, who I was enraged about 3 holes into my day. Double bogey. I was pretty upset, and then he ended up being one of my better finishing guys for a couple of my different bigger lineups that I had entered. But he's actually going the other direction this week. Not necessarily a guy that I can get behind a lot, but without any tournament history here, he'll be a guy at 7,700 that people leave alone. They ignore, because in Euro, I think tournament history and form, that's really all that people tend to gravitate towards. There's not a lot of other statistics that you can really dive on to dig into. So, he might be a guy who's a little bit contrarian. Another guy who missed last week, who's been excellent here, is Tung Chai JD. He was a guy I expected to do great last week. I think he probably burned a few people by missing the cut. So another guy you could jump back in on, and he's at 7,800. Those are the kind of guys that you can build your rosters around. I don't think there's going to be any names at the top that are going to be real sleepers or aren't going to be ones that guys don't see there. So
there's some outstanding names at the bottom that we will not try and pronounce or roster.
So there's 3 local guys in the event right around the $6,000 price tag who
it's like there's like 4 letters that they use in the names and just jumble them up between the 3 different names.
I want to think. I think some of these guys may actually be like related to some of the royal families that are down here in the area, because it almost looks like they have like a title for a name. So that wouldn't surprise me. I'm pretty sure that's probably is like a requirement of having the tournament here, is that they have to have a few local guys that are allowed to just jump into the field from other stuff. So I don't think I'll be rostering any of those.
No, probably
guys.
not. So that'll do it for us this week. If you have any questions, you can contact us through email or Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @fantasygolfers. Our email address is info@fantasygolfinsider.com. We have a couple of periscopes every week. Jason does his on Tuesday night. Zach does his on Wednesday night. You can catch me on the Guru Elite show on Sirius XM Radio on Wednesdays with Tommy G. Jason is on with Dr. Roto in the mornings as well on Scout Radio. So we're pretty much everywhere. So if you're if you can't find us, then I don't know what to tell you. So best of luck this week. Let Zach know if you're going to be out at Torrey Pines. You guys can get together and have a couple cocktails, and Toast Me will be sitting back home
doing some taxes.
That's right. Good luck this week, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.
Good luck.